There is an old tale goes that Herne the Hunter, sometimes keeper of Windsor Forest, doth all winter time, at still midnight, walk around an oak, with great ragged horns, and there he blasts the tree and takes the cattle, and makes milk churn yield blood, and shakes a chain, in a most hideous and dreadful manner. You have heard such a spirit, and well you know. The superstitious, idle-headed, well received, and did deliver to our age this tale of Herne the Hunter for a truth. This extract from Shakespeare's Merry Wives of Windsor speaks of a legend from Berkshire. Despite how ancient and almost pagan this ghost sounds, with giant stag-like antlers and roaming through the woods forever hunting and causing general mayhem for the surrounding areas, the very concept of Herne the Hunter is far more unusual. Firstly, Shakespeare's play is actually the first written document we have documenting Herne. Naturally, we might assume that Herne was known through oral history. However, this may not be the case. Oral communication may have been the bedrock for most of the public's understanding of storytelling. By the 16th century, there had been a shift. Local and national legends had long since been transcribed. Regional and national variants of the Robin Hood legends and the Arthurian legend had been well documented and established by this time. Even more bizarre local superstitious legends had been documented for public interest, such as multiple tales of the Black Dog in Yorkshire. This has led many people to question Herne's legitimacy as a local folklore figure. Typically, ghosts in English legends during this period were not associated with horror and misfortune like our modern equivalents. They usually come in two variants, being a neutral presence or a form of prophecy to those they choose to visit. Shakespeare himself was no stranger to using ghosts in his plays. In the case of Banquo's ghost in Macbeth, it serves as a manifestation of Macbeth's guilt. And in the case of Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father serves as a plot-driving device, communicating to his son about how he died. Herne, on the other hand, is the very opposite to this. He is specifically malevolent in his actions, with no distinct target. He simply causes fear and chaos indiscriminately. In the verse, Shakespeare depicts him as bewitching livestock and striking such fear into them that the cow's milk turns to blood, which is more in line with an 80s horror film than a regional ghost story from the 16th century. In the context of Shakespeare's play, Herne's image is used as the means of playing a practical joke on the character Falstaff. He is convinced by the husbands of the Merry Wives of Windsor to dress up as Herne the Hunter and meet them at an oak tree in Windsor Forest, where he is then humiliated in front of the whole town. The use of Herne may have been adopted for a stylistic reason, being that of comedy. Dressing as Herne would mean that Falstaff would have to wear antlers. A character wearing any sort of horns would have been a reference to cockholding, which was a common trope in many plays of the time, as a means of humiliation or comedy. Herne's backstory may be unestablished in earlier texts, but in the time after Shakespeare, many authors tried to add more to his story and decode where this legend may have come from. The first amendment to the Herne legend came in 1792 by an author named Samuel Ireland, who wrote that having committed some great offence for which he feared to lose his station and fall into disgrace, he was induced to hang himself upon this tree. This tree is also referenced in the Shakespeare play. Originally known as Falstaff's Oak, it was renamed Herne's Oak in the subsequent decades. before being blown down in a storm in 1863 and subsequently replaced by a new oak in 1906. Ireland also made the claim that this incident of Herne's suicide happened in the reign of Elizabeth, which lines up to when the play was written. This claim is made more interesting due to a claim made by a 19th century author, a fairy tale novelist named James Holloway Phillips, claimed to find documents that suggested a man named Richard Horne served as a forester for Henry VIII, but was found guilty of poaching in Windsor Forest. It was a very serious crime in the 16th century, punishable by hanging. If either of these claims are true, it could lead us to believe that Herne was not an ancient legend, but one that took shape in the 16th century while Shakespeare was writing the play. A folk tale developing around this possible Richard Horne, which is more akin to an urban legend, unfolding in the era in which Shakespeare wrote. Also during the 18th century, there was a huge boom in Gothic literature and the exploration of old legends. By extension, interest in Herne also peaked. New writers seemed to fuse Herne's legend with the Gothic movement and created a more tragic and demonic figure. For example, Harriet Ainsworth, in her 1843 novel Windsor Castle, mentioned Herne having been a ghost of a forester who was gored by a stag and saved by the devil on the condition that he would wear horns forevermore. But unable to deal with this, he committed suicide and was cursed to roam the great forest forever. Coincidentally, alongside this popularization of Gothic themes came an increase in claimed sightings of Herne roaming Windsor Forest, most likely due to increased public awareness. Other academics also weighed in their opinions on the origins of Herne. Jacob Grimm, of the famed Brothers Grimm, collectors of fairy tales and experts in mythology throughout Europe, viewed Herne's legend as reminiscent of European popular folklore of the wild hunt. These were a horde of phantoms that used to ride across the winter sky, particularly during stormy weather. These phantoms were often portrayed as the souls of sinful hunters taken by the devil and cursed to forever hunt, typically tracking down the souls of sinful men or elves. This connection to the devil and demons was continued in 1929 when Robert Lowe Thompson published a book, The History of the Devil, the Horned God of the West, in which he compared Herne the Hunter to the Celtic deity Cernunnos, who was largely worshipped in areas of Gaul, pre-Roman colonization. He was the god of animals and nature, frequently depicted with antlers like a stag. It is often compared to the Greek deity of Pan. However, there is no evidence of Cernunnos being worshipped outside Gaul, let alone anywhere near England. No archaeological evidence of his worship in Britain has been found as of yet. And being such a localized legend that wasn't even written until the 16th century, it's highly unlikely that the two share a base. It is more likely a coincidence, as horned gods of natural elements are not uncommon in European folklore at large. Although we may never know the truth of Herne's origins, he has left a great mark on local and national culture, and regardless to the age of the legend and its uncertain origins, Herne has earned his place in the country's strange folklore.